Imagine you're standing on the deck of a trawler. It's the middle of December. You're in the North Sea.
Hmm.
It's gray. The waves are, 30 feet high. The wind just cuts right through your gear. And honestly, it looks like the most inhospitable place on Earth.
It is grim. It's dangerous. And for centuries, that's all it was, really, just this cold, angry stretch of water separating the UK from Scandinavia.
Fishermen worked it. Vikings crossed it.
Right, but nobody thought it was special. It was just there.
Until late 1969.
Christmas Eve, 1969 to be exact, a very specific date.
Right, the Ocean Viking rig.
Yeah.
The story is amazing. Phillips Petroleum was apparently just about to give up.
They drilled so many dry holes.
Yeah, hole after hole of nothing. And they were literally days away from canceling the whole contract and sailing home. And then, at the absolute last second, the drill bit hits the Ekofisk field.
And suddenly the North Sea isn't just a cold body of water anymore.
No.
It's a bank vault.
It's a massive geological winning lottery ticket. And it's shared by two neighbors, the United Kingdom and Norway.
They both basically wake up on Christmas morning to find out they're sitting on billions and billions of barrels of black gold.
It's a perfect natural experiment when you think about it. You've got the same geography, you have the same resource, and it's happening at the same time.
Exactly. And yet, if you fast forward 50 years to today, the outcome of that lottery win could not be more different.
That is probably the understatement of the century. I was looking at the numbers in the deep dive packet for this, and it actually makes you feel a little bit sick if you're British.
It's stark.
Today, Norway has the world's largest sovereign wealth fund. They have a national savings account worth over $1.7 trillion.
Which, and this is the number that really gets you, is roughly $300,000 for every single Norwegian citizen, man, woman, and child.
And the UK. The sources are pretty brutal here. The phrase one of them uses is the UK has no national savings pot.
Nothing.
Zero. The money came in, and the money went straight back out.
It's just such a profound contrast. On one side, you have a country that used the oil to become, per capita, the wealthiest nation on Earth. They created this multi-generational safety net. And on the other side, you have a G7 economy that, while it's wealthy in a global sense, is really struggling with debt, crumbling infrastructure, and has absolutely zero financial buffer to show from that whole era. So the mission for us today is to figure out how. How does that happen? How did two neighbors start with the exact same winning ticket and end up in such wildly different financial universes? Did the UK just lose the ticket? Did Norway, cheat?
It's so tempting to think it's just luck. Or maybe that Norway just found way more oil. But the research we're unpacking today tells a very different story.
It's not out the rocks.
No, this isn't about geology. It's about decisions. It's about specific, conscious political and economic decisions that were made in boardrooms in London and in Oslo, mostly in the 1970s and 80s. And we're going to look at three sort of critical forks in the road where they diverged. We have to talk about the ownership model, which sounds dry, but it's basically who actually owns the oil.
Crucial. Then there's the savings gap, the decision to spend versus the decision to invest.
And finally, we have to talk about the population factor, because I think a lot of people just ignore the basic math of how many mouths you have to feed with that money.
Absolutely. But we have to address the core thesis right up front, because if you synthesize all the economic history we have here, it really boils down to one pretty brutal sentence.
Which is?
The UK treated the oil as a stream of income to be spent. Norway treated it as an asset to be transformed.
Spent versus transformed. Okay, let's get into the weeds. I want to start with that ownership model, because I think most people, myself included, kind of assume that when you find oil in your territory, it just belongs to the government. But it's not that simple, is it?
No, not at all. And this is where the story gets really interesting, especially for Norway. You have to go back to the early 70s. At this point, Norway was a fishing and shipping nation. They knew absolutely nothing about oil. So the big American companies, Phillips, Shell, Esso, they all swarm into Oslo.
The big boys.
The big boys. And they basically said, look, this is complicated. It's dangerous work. We'll handle everything. We'll drill. We'll build the platforms. We'll give you a nice little royalty check. And you just stay out of the way.
It's the standard colonial model, basically.
Yeah.
Don't you worry your pretty little heads about the complex engineering. Just take the cash.
Precisely. And the Norwegian Ministry of Industry was almost ready to sign those deals. They were right on the verge. But then a guy walks into the room, and this is a name that you really need to know to understand this story. Farouk al-Qasim.
I love this part of the story. It reads like a movie script. He's an Iraqi geologist, right?
He is. He studied at Imperial College in London. He worked for the Iraq Petroleum Company, but he had married a Norwegian woman, and they wanted to move to Norway to raise their family. So in 1968, he goes to the Ministry of Industry, just on a whim, really, to see if they have any work for a petroleum geologist. He was basically waiting for a train and had a few hours to kill.
And the ministry at this point is desperate. They've got these huge stacks of seismic data from the oil companies that they literally can't interpret. Nobody in Norway knows what a drilling log looks like.
Correct. So Al-Qasim walks in, and they practically lock the door behind him. He becomes the architect of the entire Norwegian oil model. He sits down with the Norwegian politicians and he says, do not let these American companies push you around. You need to control this.
And this is what leads to what the source material calls the 10 oil commandments.
Yes.
And this concept of double dipping.
Double dipping is the absolute key. Al-Qasim and the Norwegian government realize that if you just tax the profits, you leave a massive amount of money on the table. Because the real wealth is in the ownership. So they came up with this idea. You need to be an owner. So they created Statoil,
which is now called Equinor.
Right, the state-owned oil company. But it wasn't just some passive holding company. The government mandated that Statoil had to have a 50% stake in every single license that was awarded.
Oh, wait, unpack that for me.
Yeah.
So you're saying if Shell or BP wants to drill in a Norwegian block, they have to partner with the Norwegian government?
Yes. Not just partner, the Norwegian state through Statoil automatically owned 50% of the entire operation. Shell would take the geological risk, they'd bring the technology, but the state owned half the asset from day one.
Wow.
And that means Norway gets the tax revenue, which, by the way, they set at a staggering 78% on profits.
78%.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they get 50% of the profits as a shareholder. They get the dividends.
That is incredibly aggressive. 78% tax plus half the equity. I mean, why on earth did the oil companies agree to that?
Because the fields were that big. They were so massive and so profitable that even with that split, there was still enough money for Shell and Esso to make billions and billions of dollars.
So their smaller slice was still a giant pie.
Exactly. But Norway ensured that they captured the lion's share of the economic rent. They controlled the means of production.
Okay, so that's the Norwegian double dip. Now let's shift the scene to London. The UK has the same geology, same giant fields. Did they have a Farouk Al-Qasim? Did they have this moment of genius?
Well, the interesting thing is the UK actually did start with a state oil company. It was called the British National Oil Corporation, or Britoil.
So they were on the same path.
For a while. In the 70s, under a Labour government, the UK was definitely moving towards a model that was somewhat similar to Norway's. They wanted state participation, state control.
But then came 1979.
And Margaret Thatcher.
The Iron Lady.
And you just cannot understand this story without understanding the ideology here. Thatcherism was built on a core belief that the state is inefficient, that the government has no business running airlines or phone companies
or oil rigs.
Their philosophy was privatization. The belief was that private companies, driven by the profit motive, would run the industry better, faster, and more efficiently than a bunch of bureaucrats in Whitehall.
So enter 1982. The pivotal year.
1982, Nigel Lawson, who was the energy secretary at the time, orchestrates the sale of Britoil. It was the largest privatization in the world at that point.
They sold the state oil company? The whole thing?
The whole thing. They sold it off to the public and to private investors.
I've read some of the critiques from the source material that say they sold it, and I'm quoting here, for a song.
That's the consensus among many economists looking back, yes.
Yeah.
The share price was almost certainly set low to ensure successful sale, which usually means it was undervalued.
But the bigger issue wasn't just the one-time sale price, was it?
No, not at all. It was the loss of that future stream of dividends. Forever.
Right. This is the golden goose analogy I've heard. Norway kept the goose Equinor and just sold the golden eggs every year.
And the UK sold the goose. For a one-time cash lump sum.
And in doing that, they gave up that second dip.
Completely. The UK government still got the tax revenue. And we should be clear, they did tax the oil companies, sometimes heavily, but they missed out entirely on the corporate profits. They missed the dividends, and they missed the massive capital appreciation of owning the company itself.
And when you look at Equinor today, it's a global energy giant. The dividends it pays directly into the Norwegian state budget must be astronomical.
Billions and billions of dollars a year, just pure profit on top of the taxes. The UK receives precisely zero dividends from North Sea oil and gas today
Why?
because it owns 0% of the operators.
It just seems like such an obvious, catastrophic mistake in hindsight. But I want to play devil's advocate for a second. In 1982, the oil price was all over the place. Oil is a risky business.
It is.
Was there an argument that the UK government was de-risking? Hey, let private companies take the risk with the platform blowing up or the price crashing to $10 a barrel?
That was absolutely part of the argument. And it's a valid conservative economic principle. The government argued that the British taxpayer shouldn't be on the hook for drilling dry holes or, God forbid, major environmental disasters.
A plausible argument.
It is. And look, if the price of oil had collapsed to $5 a barrel and stayed there for 30 years, the UK might have looked very smart for cashing out when they did.
But the price didn't stay at $5.
No. Eventually, it went to over $100. And Norway was positioned to capture all of that upside. The UK, well, they watched from the sidelines.
So that's the first massive divergence, ownership. Norway became a capitalist player in its own right. The UK just remained the regulator, the tax collector. But that brings us to the second, and I'd say arguably more painful, divergence. The savings gap. Because even if the UK didn't own the companies, they still collected billions in tax revenue.
Hundreds of billions of pounds over the years, a huge amount of money. So, where is it? If Norway has $1.7 trillion sitting in a fund, surely the UK has something. A smaller fund. A plaque on a wall somewhere.
They probably have a plaque. That plaque says debt.
That is harsh.
It's the reality.
Yeah.
The UK Treasury treated North Sea oil revenue as general income. It just went into the same big pot as VAT, income tax, and the duty on cigarettes.
And it flowed right back out again.
Immediately.
Let's look at the Norwegian Pension Fund Global first, just to set the benchmark. When did they actually set this thing up?
This is a really interesting detail. They passed the law to create the fund in 1990, but, and this is so crucial, they didn't put a single krone into it until 1996.
6 years. Why the delay?
Discipline. They made a rule for themselves. They said, we will only put money in the fund if the government has a budget surplus. And in the early 90s, Norway, like a lot of Europe, had a bit of a recession. They actually needed the oil money to pay the bills, so they spent it. But the second the economy recovered in 1996 and they had a surplus, they started transferring it into the fund. That requires incredible political restraint. It's like the marshmallow test on a national level. I could eat this marshmallow now.
Spend the money.
Or I can wait, and I'll have 2 marshmallows later.
And they waited. And the results are just staggering. The fund now owns about 1.5% of all listed companies in the world.
Wait, stop. 1.5% of every public company on the planet.
On average, yes. They own a piece of Apple, Microsoft, Nestle, Samsung, Toyota, you name it. If you walk down Regent Street in London, that prime real estate, the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund owns a huge chunk of it. They effectively use their oil money to buy the world.
And they have a strict rule about how they spend it.
Right.
They don't just raid the piggy bank whenever they feel like building a new bridge.
It's a famous rule. It's called the Handelingsregelen, the budgetary rule. It says they can only transfer the real return of the fund into the national budget each year.
So roughly 3%.
Roughly 3%. In other words, they live off the interest. They never, ever touch the principal.
It's an endowment for eternity.
That's the entire philosophy.
Okay, now let's turn the camera back to the UK. We know they didn't save it, but I think it's too easy to just say Thatcher wasted it. We have to look at the context of Britain in the late 70s and early 80s.
You absolutely have to. You can't understand the UK's decision without understanding the crisis they were in.
The winter of discontent.
Yeah. In the late 70s, the UK was genuinely known as the sick man of Europe. Inflation was rampant, sometimes over 20%. The trade unions were incredibly powerful and constantly striking.
I've seen the photos from that time. There were literal piles of garbage rotting in Leicester Square because the trash collectors were on strike.
Bodies were going unburied because grave diggers were striking. It felt to many people like society was collapsing.
It was a country on its knees.
It was. So when Thatcher came to power in 1979, her mission, as she saw it, was to break that cycle. She wanted to fundamentally restructure the entire British economy, break the power of the unions, close the old, inefficient coal mines, and modernize industry.
But that kind of major surgery is expensive.
It is incredibly expensive and painful. When you close coal mines, you create mass unemployment. At one point in the early 80s, unemployment in the UK officially hit 3 million people.
And those 3 million people need unemployment benefits. They need housing support.
Precisely. So where did the oil money go? Bucket number one. It went to paying unemployment benefits. The North Sea revenue effectively paid for the social cost of deindustrialization.
So it was a cushion.
It allowed Thatcher to shut down the mines and fight the unions without the country descending into total anarchy. It paid the bills for that transition.
So in a strange way, the oil money did save the UK. Just not in the way Norway's did. It saved them from, immediate collapse.
That's the most charitable interpretation, and it has a lot of validity. It was the bridge loan that got the UK from the post-war industrial age to the modern financial age.
But there was another bucket.
Yes. Bucket number two, tax cuts.
The famous Thatcher tax cuts.
You have to remember, in the 1970s, the top rate of income tax on investment income in the UK was 98%.
98%? I mean, what's the point? Why would anyone invest anything?
That was exactly the argument. It was seen as confiscatory. So Thatcher used the cushion of the oil revenue to slash those rates. The top rate of income tax came down to 60%, then eventually to 40%. The basic rate was cut significantly as well.
So the economic theory here is, instead of the government saving the money in a big pot, they gave it back to the people, mostly the wealthy and the middle class, and said, you save it, you invest it, you create jobs.
That was the theory. Popular capitalism. The problem is when you give people a tax cut, they generally don't save the difference in a sovereign wealth fund.
They buy a new car. They extend the kitchen.
They consume. And that wealth fueled a massive consumption boom in the 1980s, the yuppie era. Champagne, big shoulder pads, those brick-sized mobile phones.
It created a huge short-term boom.
A massive boom. But it was a sugar high. Once that money was spent on a new Ford Sierra or a holiday in Spain, it was gone. It wasn't invested in productive assets that would be sitting there paying dividends in 2024.
It's actually heartbreaking when you lay it out like that. The UK, essentially through this huge decade-long party in the 1980s, paid for by this one-time windfall from the North Sea. And now the bill is due, and the account is completely empty.
And it gets worse, because the party didn't just spend all the money. The party actually, in a way, trashed the house.
Which brings us to Dutch disease.
Yeah.
Section 3, the economic context. This is a term from the 70s, right? It involves the Netherlands and a natural gas discovery.
Yes, exactly. The Economist magazine coined it in 1977. And the mechanism is really, really important to understand because it explains why the north of England looks the way it does today.
Okay, break it down for us. How does finding a load of oil hoot your factories? It sounds counterintuitive.
It's all about the currency. When the UK started exporting massive amounts of oil in the early 80s, the rest of the world, Germany, Japan, the US, had to buy British pounds sterling, to pay for that oil.
Okay, so there's huge demand for the pound.
Huge demand. And basic economics tells you that when demand for something goes up, its price goes up. The value of the pound went through the roof. It became what they call a petrocurrency.
The pound gets really strong, which sounds good, right?
Yeah.
Cheap holidays to Florida.
It's great for tourists and for people importing things. It is catastrophic for exporters.
Ugh.
Imagine you're a company that makes steel in Sheffield or ceramics in Stoke-on-Trent or cars in Coventry. Suddenly, because the pound is so strong, your products are 30 or 40% more expensive for an American or a German to buy.
And you didn't do anything wrong. Your factory didn't become less efficient. The currency just moved against you.
Exactly. You get priced out of the global market almost overnight. At the same time, the oil industry is booming, so it's sucking up all the best engineers and investment capital, pushing up wages. So your local costs are going up while your exports are collapsing.
And the result is, well, it's the hollowed-out factories and the post-industrial landscapes we see in documentaries about the North.
The manufacturing base of the United Kingdom collapsed at a record speed in the early 1980s. Much, much faster than in comparable countries like France or Germany. The oil boom directly accelerated the death of British industry.
So let me see if I have this right. The oil money killed the factories, which created mass unemployment, which then required the government to spend the oil money on unemployment benefits. It's a doom loop.
It was a vicious feedback loop, yes. Now, Norway faced this exact same risk.
All right.
Their krone could have shot up too. But how did they handle it?
This is where the fun comes in again, isn't it? By moving the money offshore.
Precisely. This is the hidden genius of the Sovereign Wealth Fund. By taking the oil dollars and immediately investing them in foreign stocks and bonds, buying Apple shares in New York, government bonds in Tokyo, real estate in Paris, They kept that money from ever flooding the Norwegian domestic economy.
They sterilized the cash inflow.
They completely sterilized it. They deliberately prevented the Norwegian krone from becoming too strong, and in doing so, they protected their other export industries, their fishing, their aluminum, their shipping. They refused to let the oil cannibalize the rest of their economy.
That is such a sophisticated piece of macroeconomic management. It's not just saving for a rainy day. It's active saving as a tool to protect your present-day competitiveness.
And that's a big reason why Norway still has a diverse, healthy economy today, whereas the UK became incredibly lopsided, a massive dominant financial sector in London, which loved the strong pound, and a decimated industrial base almost everywhere else.
It really paints this clear picture of two totally different philosophies. Norway was, we must protect the collective future and the existing economy.
Mhm.
And the UK was, unleash the market forces now.
And let the chips fall where they may.
But, and this is the big but that we promised everyone we'd get to, we have to talk about the population factor. Because whenever you make this comparison between the UK and Norway, someone in the room always yells, but Norway is tiny.
And they are 100% right to yell that. It is arguably the single most important piece of context for this whole discussion.
Okay, let's just look at the raw numbers. Norway's population today.
It's about 5.5 million people, so roughly the size of Minnesota or
Yeah.
Scotland.
In the UK.
Over 67 million.
So it's not even
So
close.
it's a factor of more than 12. And this is what economists call the denominator effect. If you take $1 billion of oil revenue and you divide it by 5 million people, everyone gets a pretty nice check.
Right.
You divide that same $1 billion by 67 million people, and it barely buys everyone a cup of coffee. The money is just spread so much thinner.
So let's run the thought experiment. Even if the UK had copied Norway's model perfectly, they kept Bertoil, they set up a fund, they saved every single penny. They didn't do the tax cuts, they didn't pay the extra benefits, they just hoarded the cash.
Okay.
Would they have a fund worth $300,000 per person today?
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. Not even close. If the UK had a fund that was of a proportional size to its oil wealth and its population, some estimates in the source material say it might be worth maybe 20 or 30,000 pounds per person today.
Which is fine. It's certainly better than zero, but it's not retire at 50 and live off the interest money.
Exactly. The source material uses this great analogy. For Norway, oil was an engine. The revenue was so large relative to its small population that it could fundamentally drive the entire state.
For the UK, oil was a bonus.
It was a bonus.
A nice tip, but it wasn't the whole salary.
It was a very significant bonus. At its absolute peak in the mid-80s, it provided maybe 10% of the UK government's total tax revenue. That is huge.
Yeah, that's not nothing.
But it wasn't 50%. It was never going to be enough to eliminate income tax or build a Scandinavian-style utopia for 67 million people. It was enough to grease the wheels, maybe patch a few holes, but not to replace the entire car.
That's such a crucial reality check. Because I think people look at the headline number from Norway and think the UK should be that rich. But the per capita math just doesn't support that conclusion.
It doesn't. But, and here's the really important counterargument, just because you can't be a millionaire doesn't mean you should have zero in your savings account.
Right, exactly. The choice wasn't be Norway or be broke. There was a huge middle ground available.
The UK could have built a modest sovereign wealth fund. Maybe it would be worth 400 or 500 billion pounds today. That would be an incredibly useful pot of money right now to fix the National Health Service or repair the country's crumbling schools.
That is the real point.
Yeah.
The tragedy isn't that the UK isn't Norway. The tragedy is that the UK has nothing to show for it.
It's the difference between not winning the Powerball jackpot, but winning $1 million second prize.
And then blowing it all on scratch cards at the gas station.
That's a harsh way of putting it, but economically it's not far off.
I want to circle back to the politics of this for a moment, because it's very easy to pin this all on Thatcher and the Conservatives in the 80s. But didn't the Labour government in the 1990s and 2000s also get a second bite at this apple?
They absolutely did. This is not just a conservative failure, it's a bipartisan failure. In the late 90s and through the 2000s, under Prime Ministers Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, oil prices spiked again. The UK had a second big wind of revenue coming in.
And what did they do with that money?
They spent it. They spent it on hospitals, on schools, on public services, which, are good things. People need hospitals and schools. But they didn't save any of it. Gordon Brown, who was the chancellor, famously sold off a large chunk of the UK's gold reserves at the very bottom of the market, and he spent the oil revenue as it came in year after year.
So the addiction to spending the resource rent, as they call it, spanned the entire political spectrum. It became the default setting.
It did. It became a structural feature of British politics. No politician, Labour or Conservative, wanted to be the one to stand up and tell the voters, we are going to raise your taxes or cut your services today so that we can put money in a fund for your grandchildren.
In a 5-year election cycle, that's political suicide.
Absolutely.
So how do they sell it in Norway? How do you tell a Norwegian voter, hey, we are sitting on billions and billions of dollars of oil money, but you still have to pay some of the highest taxes in the world, and by the way, gas for your car is going to be incredibly expensive.
It's a great question. I think part of it is that Norway is a very cohesive, high-trust society. People there generally trust their government to do the right thing. There's a deep culture of egalitarianism and stewardship.
A long-term mindset.
A very long-term mindset. But also, I think the crisis of the early 90s really scared them. They saw how volatile oil could be, how quickly the revenue could dry up, and they collectively agreed that they needed an insurance policy.
Fear is a great motivator.
It is. The UK perhaps was too arrogant. It was the former head of a global empire. Or maybe it was just too desperate to fix the immediate burning problems of the present to ever think about the future.
So let's try to synthesize all this. We have a scorecard from the notes that I want to run through just to lock this in for everyone listening.
Let's do it.
Okay. Category 1, primary use of funds. Norway.
Long-term investment, building the fund.
Yeah.
Short-term consumption, tax cuts and paying benefits. In short, one bought assets, the other paid bills.
Category 2, state involvement. Norway.
High. They became a majority owner in the fields through their state company, Equinor.
And the UK.
Low. They privatized their state company, Brutoil, and became a spectator.
Okay. Category 3, economic protection. How did Norway handle the currency issue?
They sterilized the cash offshore in the fund. They actively protected their other industries from Dutch disease.
The UK.
They spent the money domestically, which caused the pound to skyrocket and helped torch their manufacturing base.
And finally, category 4, the result. Norway's bottom line today.
A $1.7 trillion fund, making them the wealthiest country per capita on Earth.
And the UK's bottom line.
No national savings pot. Zero. The numbers don't lie.
It's a really sobering scorecard. And I keep coming back to the what if. We're approaching the end here, and I just want to leave our listener with a final thought experiment.
Go on.
Let's just imagine for a second that the UK had kept Brutoil, and imagine they had started a fund in 1980. Even with all the problems, the strikes, the sick man of Europe stuff, what if they had just managed to save, say, 20% of the revenue? Not all of it. Just a fifth.
It's a fascinating counterfactual. If the UK had a sovereign wealth fund today worth even 400 or 500 billion pounds, the entire political and economic conversation in Britain would be different.
How so? What would change?
Well, think about the UK government right now. They are desperate for cash. They're raising taxes on working people. They're cutting things like winter fuel payments for pensioners. They're scraping the barrel for every penny. If they had a fund that was generating, say, 20 billion pounds a year in dividends, pure profit, they could properly fund social care for the elderly. They could build high-speed rail without taking on more debt. It provides a margin for error, a financial cushion.
It gives you options.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wealth gives you options. Debt gives you constraints. Norway has infinite options. The UK has constraints.
And what about the industrial base? If they had managed the currency better, if they hadn't let the pound get so strong?
Well, that might be the bigger, more human tragedy. If they had protected the manufacturing sector from that currency spike in the 80s, maybe cities like Sheffield, Newcastle, Glasgow, maybe they wouldn't have suffered such deep generational economic scars.
The famous north-south divide in the UK might be much smaller.
It's very possible. So the decision wasn't just about money in a bank account. It was about the fundamental shape of the society. It defined the economic geography of the nation for half a century.
That is heavy, but it's the lesson here, isn't it? That a resource windfall, it's not a blessing or a curse.
No.
It's a test.
It's an amplifier. That's the best word for it. It amplifies the quality of your governance. If you have good governance, disciplined planning, and a long-term view, a resource boom can make you Norway.
And if you have short-termism, political instability, and ideological rigidity.
Resources can leave you with a 50-year hangover.
Or leave you like the UK, certainly richer than you would have been without the oil, but constantly wondering where all the money went.
The great mystery of the lost billions.
Before we go, I have to ask about the future. The oil in the North Sea is running out, right? I mean, this isn't an infinite resource.
It is definitely in decline. Norway is pumping less than it used to, and the UK is pumping much, much less. The party is ending.
So Norway is sitting on this massive pile of cash as the oil fields run dry.
Yeah.
And the UK is sitting on...
A pile of decommissioning costs. This is the final irony. The UK government is now actually paying oil companies tax rebates to help them dismantle the old rusty rigs in the North Sea.
Wait, what? So the flow of money has actually reversed. The British taxpayer is now paying the oil companies.
In some cases, yes. It's part of the complex tax deal. If you pay huge taxes on your profits on the way up, you get tax relief on your shutdown costs on the way down. But since there are no more profits, the government is effectively writing checks to help clean up the mess.
That is the ultimate bitter irony.
Yeah.
We sold the goose, we ate all the eggs, and now we have to pay someone to come and clean the goose's empty cage.
While your neighbor, Norway, uses the interest from their massive fund to pivot into green energy and advanced technology, they are using the wealth from the old energy economy to fund their transition to the new one.
Decisions, decisions.
Decisions matter.
Well, on that cheery note, no, seriously, this has been incredibly illuminating. It's a story about geology, sure, but at its heart, it's a story about people. It's about Farouk Al-Qasim sitting in that waiting room. It's about Nigel Lawson in his office in Whitehall. And it's about the millions of voters who went along with one path or the other.
History is made by people showing up and making choices.
If you want to dig deeper into the 10 Commandments of Norwegian oil policy, or read the specific UK government white papers from the Thatcher era, please check the show notes. We've linked all the sources. It is a true masterclass in economic policy.
Highly recommended reading.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. Next time you look at a map of the North Sea, remember, beneath those cold gray waves lies a history of two neighbors who found the same treasure and took very, very different paths.
Goodbye.
Catch you next time.